All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Minority Mavericks. This is Angel Leon, your host. And this is the show where we tell the story of every single minority entrepreneur, founder, and investor of this world. And in today's show, I have the pleasure and the honor to have Alicia Castillo, and she is the founder of Wealthing VC Fund. Welcome to the show, Alicia.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for being, on the show today. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy person, so I really appreciate you having here and sharing your story with our listeners. But just to kind of start from the very beginning of things, right? Could you share your journey with us, right? Your background and a bit about all those investment and that journey that led you to found Wealth in BC.
Well, I am an unusual investor. I grew up in Venezuela. My parents were socialist, and I was socialist for a long time. Very, very interested in nature and in science. I grew up in a little town called El Limon. It's not even in the map. I also lived in Acarigua, which is a rice region, when I was, very, very young. But I grew up literally in El Limon next to an amazing rainforest. And I became a scientist at a young age. I presented my first research paper when I was 16, understanding how viruses is transmitted in plants. I worked for 15 years as a researcher, and then I joined Bayer and Shell as head of product development, and that was my entry point into the business world. One of my students took me there. And then after that, I decided that I needed to understand business. My boss at the time told me, if you want to change the business world, change it inside the business. Don't change it outside because you don't know what's going on. You don't know what you're doing. And he was right. He was absolutely right. I then took a year off. I took a sabbatical and I managed an opera house, self-funded sabbatical. That was a lot of fun, especially coming from deep science. And I moved to Boston. Unfortunately, there was a bank crisis in Venezuela at the end of my self-funded sabbatical, and I lost all my money to a bank crisis. And I moved to Boston with my two kids. I came to the U.S. with two kids and two boxes, and all I could bring was $600 and two suitcases too. Did my MBA here, went to work in Switzerland, came back. I did my MBA at Babson College in Massachusetts, and that's when I discovered entrepreneurship. And so I went to the library. I printed 140 countries. I started crossing down, and I decided to go to Chile. And in Chile, I started the first Center for Entrepreneurship because I know entrepreneurship is the way to make progress. And then I realized 2 years later that entrepreneurship without capital doesn't go anywhere. So I created the first seed capital fund, and we were very successful. And then I left the country and I continued moving. So after being in Silicon Valley for a few years and investing profusely in early stage companies, I realized that the companies didn't have enough funds to continue their growth. And so it was kind of stupid. It's like having a baby and then taking care of the baby. And then when the baby is 5, you send it to the world and I said, okay, go fend for yourself. So I thought, let me just restart again. I came to the idea of having a fund because I saw, after investing in a lot of early stage companies, I saw that we were not doing a good job. This is like we put a lot of effort in a company when they start. It's like having a baby. And then when you're 4 or 5 years old, you show them the door and say, go and fend for yourself. And there was not enough growth capital that was good capital. So I decided to do that for the companies that I've invested and the companies that I did not invest before, but they were creating a huge amount of value for society, not only for investors, but also for society at large. They were creating good jobs. They were creating better quality of life. And I decided to do a fund because of that. So at the fund, we invest in growth. That's pretty much what we do. There's a lot of people investing in early stage. We invest in growth.
But in your world, right, you probably, of course, you're from other country as well, so you have this global perspective as well. How do you ensure diversity and inclusion, that to be an integral part, right, of your investment choices? And what steps do you take to support these underrepresented and underestimated entrepreneurs in your portfolio?
That is a fantastic question. I love it. And there's one thing that I am very, very firm about, and it is just because you're underrepresented doesn't mean I'm going to invest. So I have a high bar, and you need to meet me at that bar. And one of the problems that I see is that a lot of people are condescending. They're condescending to me as well. So I'm a Latino woman, and they're condescending. They don't tell me the things that I need to hear to make my business better. And that has created a vicious circle, because then what happens is that you don't get the feedback that you need. Therefore, you don't get the improvements that you need.
Right.
Whereas if you are a white guy, people have absolutely no issue telling you things that you should hear because they assume that you can take it. An underrepresented
Right.
founder has more thick skin because we are so used to being rejected and discounted. But we just need to hear
Hmm.
the things that will help us improve, not the things that are said to us because the expectations that we're going to do something amazing are very low. So that is the first thing. So I wrote a, you might want to edit it, but I'm very strong about this. I wrote an article on LinkedIn called "Think Like a White Man," and
Okay.
what happens is I see that because the feedback that we get as underrepresented founders or investors, because I'm an investor, the feedback that we get is constantly discounting the capacity that we have to do things. And for example, I have a fund, and people assume that
Okay.
because I'm a Latino woman, I invest in Latino women. And I invest in Latino women in things that people perceive Latino women do well, which is cooking and cleaning and makeup, which
Right.
that's not my area. My area is biotech. But that's the assumption. The assumption is that I only invest in women. The assumption is I only invest in Latinos. Those are all wrong assumptions. I invest in good business models. But it is such a difficult thing to break the stereotypes.
Right.
And the one thing that everybody can do is hold an underrepresented founder to the standards that you hold anybody, and do not discount them, because subconsciously you're discounting their goals, their ambitions, their value. That's why I love being in the postcard. This is amazing. That's the first thing. The
Okay.
second thing, the second thing is that I'm a firm believer in diversity and inclusion. And there are two types of diversity. There's a visible diversity, and there's the invisible diversity. And what we mean by that is that we need to create this space where people feel respected and appreciated. We need to create that space, because if we don't create that space, we cannot reap the benefits of diversity and inclusion.
Right.
I don't like having teams that are only women, only men, only Latinos, only Muslims, only Blacks. I don't like those. Only gays. I don't like those teams, because we need to be able to include other people in our meetings. We need to be able to talk to them, and they need to be able to express their opinion without feeling diminished, discounted, undervalued, or laughed at, because their opinions matter.
Right.
And it's in that conversation that we do magic. Really, we do magic by having diverse conversations. When I see teams that are of companies that we invest in, when we see teams that have no diversity, we expect them to have a diversity policy, and we give those companies the tools so they can start implementing those things. One of the things that I learned when I was living in Australia was positive incorporation. And what this person said to me was that for any particular job that you are hiring or that you are creating and people are growing in the company, there has to be at least 3 candidates that look very different.
Okay.
And that is what we do. So that is one of our policies. We have a very
Okay.
diverse team at the fund and at the club. The club is very diverse. And you want to make sure that those people that are different to the main characters in your organization have a place where they can thrive. And that's how we nurture diversity. All of our companies have a diversity mandate because we have a diversity mandate. And I think,
Okay.
at least in Silicon Valley where I am, it's very common that the founders of startups come from Stanford because it's right here in my backyard. But then I said, well, what happens to the company? What happens to the people that don't come from Stanford? How are you going to bring
Right.
the best people? How are you going to bring people from Latin America or from the Middle East or from Africa or from Asia? How are you going to bring these people in?
Hmm.
And that is the recurrent question. Is if you are investing in a company because they are underrepresented founders and you don't give them the tools and you don't bring diversity to the teams, that's not working properly either.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And we were actually with one of our other guests in the show. We were talking about specifically about that the diversity. It's also a misconception sometimes in the sense that diversity is diversity, right? It includes everyone. It doesn't matter your color, your background, and like you mentioned about these groups, right? There's VCs for Latinos, there's VC for Black people, there's VCs for people of color, right? And of course, it does seem that originally these groups, right, started to form together just to kind of support, right, that specific group, which is amazing, right? And it's great. But I truly believe that there's another perspective of just diversity that VCs shouldn't necessarily focus just on Black people or just on Latinos, right? And it should, and if we're the ones talking about diversity, then it should be diverse, right? And it should be everyone included. But also, it's interesting because this other person was actually as well had this global perspective that you have, right? So you've lived in different countries, you come from a different country, and you have that global perspective. And it's interesting that you two actually have that same shared mentality in the sense that even though you're both Latinos as well, you don't think that you should necessarily just focus on Latinos, and that there should be always a standard, right? It doesn't matter whether you're whatever color you are, right? There's always a standard because at the end of the day, you're still a businesswoman, right? And this is your life. So you have to protect what's yours as well. And I just found that very, very interesting, that similarity, in terms of that mentality. So it's really, really nice to just hear that and be able to compare that with other investors, minority as well, like yourself. Um, but I've read a lot about you too, in different articles. You pretty much like everywhere in terms of you're a leader, right, in philanthropy, education, and as an educator yourself, and the Wealthing Institute, right? How does that contribute to a more inclusive entrepreneurial landscape? Right, and then what strategies do you employ to address these diversity gaps in education, right? Particularly in these minority individuals.
Wow, that's a very, very deep question. Because I've lived in many countries, I I had to develop. I wouldn't call it a thick skin, but because I lived in different countries, I had to understand how to fit in, not to feel rejected constantly.
Okay.
And then what ended up happening was, without knowing, I was developing what is called an internal locus of control. And to
Okay.
summarize what internal locus of control is, it is the perception that it is two things: the perception that your destiny is defined by your actions, not by your circumstances, and also it
Mhm.
is the notion that the opinion you have of yourself is more important than the opinion others have of you.
Okay.
I bring that to our training constantly, because also if you look white, and I look white, if you look white, people would put you in a pedestal. People would assume that you don't have any problems. People would assume that everything is easy for you, and people would assume that you have the authority to speak, whether you have it or not. And that creates other sets of problems for people that feel that they're not there. And then we have, and we all know, people, even public figures, who, because they're white guys, they act in a way that is bullying to others. They don't even realize that, but it's because the society has pushed them into
Right.
that pedestal that they have not earned. Then the other people, the people who weren't born there, and in that bucket I also include the white guys that were born very poor, because I know white guys who have been brought up in by homeless parents or parents who are very, very poor, and so they don't feel that they fit. So one of the things that we do in our training is we focus on developing internal locus of control. Nobody can do the things like you can do. They can do the things like they can do. But you have to bring your own diversity and your own uniqueness to the world. You have to develop that filter where the opinions of others are not going to get into your brain.
Okay.
And the best way that I say that, and sometimes it's kind of a joke, but I do say that to the people to their face. I don't need to buy into your insecurities. The reason why you don't think that I can do the things that I'm doing is because you discount me because you've never met anybody like me. But I'm sure you have. The real issue is that you haven't seen them because you have your own filter. That is your insecurity. It is not my job to solve your insecurities. So you need to go and think about how you view others that don't look like you, so you can have more diversity in your life, which is also more exciting.
Definitely. And we see this right in all industries out there, and specifically right in the startup world is very, very obvious, right? Again, one common denominator in this show is basically access to a lot of different things, like resources, right, capital, even just access to people and be able to meet with people, right? People discount you just by the way you look, right? And
Absolutely.
automatically, either by the way you look or sometimes even your background and your educational background as well. So it's it's a measure, right? And I struggle with that myself. I don't have necessarily a degree from a big university, and but that, I don't feel that makes me any less capable than anyone else right out there, just because I don't come from a big university. I still did a couple of master's degrees. I'm a veteran. I've been in the startup world now for about 12 years. So I feel that I have what it takes to make it right, and my educational background should get in the way of that. And again, a lot of those or the same common denominator that you can see in the show is that access that you're also kind of talking about, referring to. And
Absolutely, yeah. And I
and
love.
yeah.
Sorry, I
Mhm.
just need to caress your ego. I
Yeah,
love the way you phrase it, because you know only a person who has struggled can admire somebody else's struggle, because I know
yeah,
how hard it is. But
definitely.
if I come from a background where I never had to see that, I cannot understand the value that you have, the bravery that you have. My daughter was a foster mom to 4 kids that were Black. The bravery of those kids is immense. And
Yeah.
but if I had never had that experience with them, I would be at a disadvantage understanding how somebody who never went to college is capable of doing such amazing things, just because for me, where I grew up, college was free.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. That's one of the main disparities for sure, and just the main things that I don't know, for some reason people just use right away to discard someone, and yeah, sometimes you don't even get to be heard, and that's like one of the main. It's we're in 2024 now, right? And just to not allow someone to be heard just because of your background or whatever, to me that's just mind blowing. Like I can't even comprehend that. um but in obviously, I'm sure that again you have an extensive career. You've made a lot of investments in your life. You've founded different companies and funds, and you've been involved in so many different projects, right? Aside from that VC world as well. Are there any specific challenges that you have personally faced throughout your journey, right? And any lessons learned from your journey in trying to foster this inclusivity in the ecosystem?
Yes, I'm in my 60s now, so I have a lot of I would say wisdom from past experiences. A person asked me recently, how do I select investors for my LPs and for my club? And if there's one thing that I appreciate in people is kindness. So that has to be a defining quality in all of us is kindness. It's not being nice, it's being kind because we've never walked in somebody else's life. Um, in my worst moments, uh, I have appreciated the kindness of somebody else. And, I came to the US as a single mom with 2 kids. So I never expected anybody to help me because I grew up in Venezuela and, you just sort of figure it out. And we slept on the floor. Um, I wouldn't call it struggling, but it was funny. I told my kids, we were in Boston. I told my kids that um, people in America were so bright that they could talk. And when they talk, the vowels would form. And that's how they learned how to read and write. And they believed me. What the reality was, it was so freaking cold inside. I also told my kids that people in America didn't have beds because the rug was very thick, and of course my kids were little, and as an immigrant, you don't get invited until they know each other. And I didn't let my kids go to anybody's house because I was very concerned about being a mom and you don't know the people.
Hmm.
So then my kids started, but they said, but we did have beds. And I said, yeah, but it's in the tropics. Here people don't need it. So the capacity to use your humor, to laugh at your own things is very refreshing. The capacity to be kind to others and not to be judgmental is very, very refreshing. So those two things are human qualities that are very valuable. But there's one more thing that I was talking to a friend of mine who is a family office. He has a ton of money. He's very generous with his time and money. And we were talking about spirituality. Now, I grew up very religious. I'm not that religious anymore. But you have to find, in your hardest times, you have to find something that holds you together.
Hmm.
And wherever it is. And I think that is lacking in people today. Very easy to talk to you. I've never met you. Very easy to talk to you. Very easy to be egotistic and say, "Oh, I know, I have figured it out." But the reality is that we as humans, we have to find something that holds us together when we are alone.
Definitely.
Who are we? I was in coma when I was 13. So I always wonder, who am I when I'm no longer here in time and space? And just having sort of that spiritual reflection that doesn't have to be religious. It's just
Right.
that I think was critical for the many times that I didn't know if I was going to be in the streets with my kids. I didn't know how I'm going to buy food tomorrow. I'm worried. Did I make a mistake? How could I be well? And it goes into how could I be so stupid? just being kind not only to others but to yourself. So I think those are, being kind is very, very important, and having that sort of spiritual ground that you're important, you're worthy, you're here for a reason. Life is a gift. Let's make the best of it, and not use anybody else's measure of success as your own measure of success.
Very powerful. And I agree that it's all about, right, not necessarily a specific religion or none of that, right? It's more about, like you said, your own self, right? Minority people, we all have different type of religions, right? We share
Yeah.
a specific common goal, right, in mind anyway. But at the end of the day, we come from different backgrounds, different cultures, we eat different foods, right? And I feel that's the beauty of it all, really. Which is another thing that I was talking about with another person a while back, was just about the impact that it had in me when I was in the Navy and I traveled the world with the military. And I was a young person, right? And
Mhm.
during those developmental years of just becoming an adult, right? I traveled a lot and I saw a lot of different perspective, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different food, different type of poverties out there as well, right? And that alone just made me, I don't know, it just made me a better person in terms of understanding others' problems. I was joking, that our problems here in the U.S., for example, is that we complain that Netflix raised our subscription for $2 or something like that, right?
Yes.
And those are the things that we complain about here. And while over in some other country in the Southeast Asia or somewhere, right, they're struggling with just getting clean water to drink. And it's that perspective of things that really that help me appreciate diversity a lot more, and it helps me appreciate people a lot more. And at the end of the day, yeah, business is business, but we're all in the people business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And even in this country, there's people who are, I mean, you go to San Francisco, they're homeless people
Hmm.
and they have a value. And even in this country, I mean, you don't have to go that far either. There's foster kids. I mean, there's a lot of things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I read in San Francisco not too long ago something about the homeless people there, and some event that was happening, and then people were like kind of asking themselves where they put the homeless people, because the city decided to basically clean up the city for that event,
Yeah.
and that meant removing pretty much all these people. And then, but where do they put them is the question, right? And yeah, it's scary, to just to hear and see those things at these times. But you have different backgrounds, again, just with your everything you've done, right? Biotech is one of your main ones, right? Of course, finance and VC world and all that, and you have all these unique experiences. How has these unique experiences of yours, right, influenced your approach, right, to support these diverse entrepreneurs and founders out there?
You know, many, not all, but many of the VCs are number crunchers. I have a PhD in finance to try to understand that, and I can do the numbers. But in order to be a good investor, you have to be a good business person. The notion that somebody has to lose for you to win, it's outdated. When we create wealth, and that's why the names of my institute, my umbrella companies are all wealthy, because when we create wealth, we share it. There's no way to create wealth just to keep it to yourself.
Right.
But there's a way to be rich and keep it to yourself. But to create wealth is different. So I think that all of these experiences help me be a great investor for various reasons. First and foremost, it's because I have the people's interest at heart. The people include the founders, but I also invest in companies that create good jobs, and they provide good rewards for the hard work of the employees. I take care of the entrepreneurs, not only financially, not only by investing in the companies, but one of the reasons why we don't take board positions is because the type of deep conversations that we have to have when things don't go the way we think they're going to go, we cannot have if I'm on the board.
Okay.
And I learned that by being on the board.
Right.
And understanding that there's some fiduciary responsibilities. The fact that we create the space where a founder can call me pretty much at any time and we can have a deep conversation about a problem or a challenge without being judgmental is priceless. That is the reason why a lot of founders want us in their cap table. That's the main reason.
Okay.
The second one is because we have a lot of experience in business and because we have that approach of taking care of business, we can open a lot of doors, not only other investors, but chances are that I or somebody on my team would know a company that can buy or can sell to the founders that we support.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that is just an ecosystem more than investing in one thing.
Right.
And we make money on the way, but it's not only supporting the founders, but we support the ecosystem. And we hold people accountable if they are mistreating others. We do that too.
I love that. Yeah. Like a venture studio of the sorts, right? Where it's an all-inclusive, where, you guys don't just support by just giving, these founders money, right? But it's you guys are also making sure that your investment, right, goes into the right place, no?
Yes. If we don't, so in the angel investing community, there's a name, there's a quality for that. They say, well, we want to see if the founders are coachable. I don't like that term myself because I think being coachable, when you're saying being coachable is like, okay, I know and you don't know, I'm going to give you that. And that's a vertical relationship. I prefer horizontal relationships. So what we do evaluate before we invest in a company is, are we willing to work together? Is this founder accepting the offers to make introductions before we make an investment? Is this founder or this CEO, because sometimes it's not the founder, is this executive, let me put it that way, is this executive open to suggestions without being defensive? Is this founder or executive or CEO going to tell us their opinion because they feel safe and they value our opinion? So that is very important for us. Otherwise, we don't invest. We don't invest in people who just want our money. Go and find the money somewhere else. There's a lot of places where you can find money.
I hear your point. It's more just that founder that likes to listen and just, kind of teamwork, rather than just, I'm just looking for the money just to build this and, get out of my way type of thing.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of those founders in the industry for sure.
Yes, and you know what, Angel? It goes back to being a woman Latina.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it. So sometimes I tell people, if I was Bill Gates, you wouldn't do this. Or if my name was, I don't know, John Smith, you wouldn't think that way. So that's why I wrote that article, Think Like a White Man and Behave Like a White Man, because we're constantly being discounted. More than being listened to is having a conversation that leads to value creation. Because sometimes I'm wrong. And the founder can tell me, well, no, that's not the way it works. It works this way, or this is why we're doing it this way. And that's part of accepting diversity. Well, you have a diversity of thought.
Definitely. Yeah. And one of the things that I always say, and I'll keep saying, is that, we as minorities, we're more creative than other groups, just because of, how we've had to navigate, right, different challenges that other groups haven't necessarily had to navigate. And that makes us more creative, right? That makes us think outside the box more than your typical founder, for example, because we, the challenges that we see are 10x versus the challenges that they see. So we're always shooting for that 10x. We're never shooting for for the 1x here. We're always shooting for that one, because we programmatically we think like that as well sometimes, right? And we think that we have to show more, right, or prove more than others in order for us to put our foot in or something, right? And I feel that that's just part of the upbringing, right, and just that isolation of minority groups in every industry out there. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, this was great, very great, Alicia. I really, really loved your history. I love what your mindset in all this, in all these topics of diversity and inclusion, and I love how you're also, of course, doing your part of the work, right, of trying to bring a more inclusive ecosystem, not just again grouping Latinos and grouping Black founders and grouping people of colors and LGBTQs, etc. But it's more about connecting all of these groups together, um, and then actually creating that diverse, ecosystem where we can all have our part in equally, right? So I truly appreciate that, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express those opinions and for asking such interesting questions.
Thank you. And Alicia, just one last thing before we go here. Looking ahead in the future, do you have any future plans for yourself personally or professionally? And then would you give, if you have one piece of advice to give to one Latino woman out there, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. Just believe in yourself. That is you don't have to do things the way other people expect you to do. And don't let somebody else's insecurities get into your head. That is their problem. That is not your problem. Just always, always, always recommend. I wrote a book called Falling in Love with Your Life. And one of the things that I mentioned is that the biggest value that we have in life is the opportunity not to just fail, but to fail and rest and then get up. Not just don't fall and get up without analyzing what happened.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
but no, I think it's just believing in yourself is the most important thing, and a lot of people won't accept that.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's main one of the main things, right? It's about that self-consciousness, right, and believing in yourself that you can do it. We can do anything we can, and we set up ourselves to do. And even if you are again a minority person out there that's listening, know that there's people like Alicia, and there's people that are willing to help, that are willing to look at you as a person and not you as a Harvard graduate necessarily, and they believe that we all have ideas, right, that are willing to be heard and are willing to be listened to, and we all really appreciate that, of course, because that's the main thing, and the main work that we should all try to be doing so we can all help each other. So again, Alicia, thank you very, very much for being on the show today. And to everyone out there that was listening, this was Minority Mavericks, and this is Angel Leon, your host. And this is the show where we tell the story of every single minority entrepreneur, founder, and investor of this world. See you next time.